immortality has made you the greatest soldier of the Axe Cross. In a war between our world and the next.
Do you know what it's like to live forever?
As of June 2025, The Last Witch Hunter 2 has not been officially released or confirmed, so what follows is a hypothetical narrative analysis based on potential directions a sequel could logically take, building on the events of the original 2015 film starring Vin Diesel as Calder, an immortal witch hunter. #### narrative structure and story progression *. The Last Witch Hunter 2 likely follows a conventional three-act structure, though with room for non-linear elements, such as flashbacks to Calder's centuries-long past, which could offer new revelations about witch history or hidden truths about Calder's origins. ###. Act 1. Resurgence of the Witch Queen's legacy. The film opens in a post-Witch Queen world, where the balance between humans and witches remains precarious. Calder, still cursed with immortality, works with the Axe and Cross organization, but signs of unrest among powerful witch factions hint at the Queen's lingering influence. The inciting incident emerges when a mysterious global magical disturbance, a series of unexplained magical phenomena and deaths, signals the return of an ancient dark force. A group of rogue witches, calling themselves the Covenant of Embers, seeks to resurrect not the Queen herself, but her progenitor, the First Witch, a primordial being whose power predates written magic. Calder, haunted by cryptic visions, seeks the guidance of Chloe, now a more confident and powerful dreamwalker, who senses that Calder's immortality may be tied directly to this ancient evil. ###. Act 2. The Broken Timeline. The middle section of the film takes a darker, more non-linear turn. Chloe helps Calder relive key moments of his past using dreamwalking magic. Through these flashbacks, the audience learns that Calder's curse was not just a punishment but a safeguard mechanism, a magical lock keeping the First Witch sealed. In these dream sequences, Calder confronts painful memories, the loss of his wife and daughter, and the betrayal of early witch allies. These moments add emotional weight and provide depth to his character, moving beyond the stoic warrior archetype into something more layered and vulnerable. As the Covenant inches closer to unsealing the First Witch, Calder faces a moral conflict. To end the threat forever, he must die, willingly. The immortality tethered to the First Witch must be severed to close the gateway for good. ###. Act 3. Sacrifice and Rebirth. The final act builds toward a grand confrontation at an ancient convergence site, possibly beneath a magically dormant volcano or a hidden astral plane. As Calder and Chloe face the Covenant's leader, Seraphine a witch born of fire and shadow, truths unravel about Calder's original Slayer lineage and its corruption. In the climactic battle, Chloe combines her dream-walking powers with Calder's last act of sacrifice. He offers up his immortality in a ritual that binds the First Witch in a prison of memory, locking her inside the collective dreamscape of the witch world, accessible only by Calder's final thoughts. However, in a final twist, Chloe uses a sliver of Calder's memory to rebuild him as a mortal, giving him a second life, but now with the ability to age, love and die, a true gift after centuries of burden. The emotional payoff is significant. Calder's journey from cursed immortal to fully human is both symbolic and cathartic. ###. Key turning points *. Magical disturbances tied to a deeper, older magic. Flashbacks revealing Calder's original pact and the true source of his curse. Moral dilemma. Calder must die to save the world. Chloe's empowerment, evolving from sidekick to magical equal. Rebirth ending, suggesting future stories with new characters or Calder in a mentor role. Hashtag themes and emotional resonance asterisk. The sequel would likely explore themes such as asterisk the cost of immortality, asterisk the burden of memory and trauma, asterisk the ambiguity of good and evil in magic, asterisk reconciliation with the past to protect the future, asterisk letting go of power to embrace vulnerability. Hashtag conclusion asterisk. The Last Witch Hunter 2, while grounded in action fantasy tradition, has the potential to delve deeper into character psychology, legacy, and redemption. By blending linear progression with memory-based flashbacks, the narrative expands Calder's mythos and offers an emotionally satisfying evolution from eternal hunter to mortal protector. The sequel, in essence, would not just be about hunting witches, but about what it means to finally stop running from one's own haunted history. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, character development takes center stage in deepening the mythos and emotional core established in the original film. The sequel not only expands the supernatural world but also provides a more intimate look into the psychological and emotional dimensions of its central characters, particularly Calder, the titular witch hunter, and his allies and adversaries. The film explores transformation not just through magic, but through loss, forgiveness, and identity. Hashtag Calder, the eternal warrior in search of mortality. Calder, portrayed once again by Vin Diesel, remains the emotional nucleus of the film. In the first installment, his curse of immortality was both his strength and torment. The Last Witch Hunter 2 delves deeper into this paradox. Haunted by centuries of war, betrayal, and loneliness, Calder's arc centers on his desire for closure and reconnection to humanity. In this sequel, Calder is not merely a warrior. He is a man reckoning with the ghosts of his past. Flashbacks interwoven with present-day conflict reveal layers of emotional trauma, especially from the loss of his family and friends over centuries. The film allows him to be more introspective, questioning the cost of eternal life and his role in an ever-changing world. His growth is most evident when he hesitates to kill a young witch who reminds him of his long-dead daughter, suggesting that his black-and-white view of witches has begun to blur. His relationship with death is a key narrative driver. By the film's midpoint, Calder is presented with the possibility of regaining mortality through a forbidden rite. This temptation introduces a compelling internal conflict. Should he abandon his duty for peace, or embrace his curse to prevent greater evil? His ultimate decision to remain immortal, not out of punishment, but as an act of self-sacrifice, marks a mature transformation in his character. Hashtag Chloe. From sidekick to spiritual successor. Chloe, played by Rose Leslie, who once served as Calder's ally and dreamwalker, emerges as a fully realized co-lead in the sequel. The time jump between the films allows her to mature significantly. She is now a powerful and respected figure in the witch community, navigating her dual allegiance to both witches and humanity. Her arc is one of leadership and legacy. Initially conflicted about whether to protect her people or aid Calder, she evolves into a bridge between worlds. Her inner conflict mirrors the themes of trust and betrayal, especially when a faction of witches views her alliance with Calder as treasonous. Chloe's growing mastery over dreamwalking magic also serves as a visual metaphor for her internal journey, diving deeper into unconscious realms and emerging with clarity. Her relationship with Calder is no longer one of mentor and pupil, but of equals. Their dynamic, at times father-daughter, at others comrade-in-arms, grounds the film emotionally. Chloe's final act, a powerful merging of dream and reality to protect the world, suggests she may one day become the true heir to the witch hunter's legacy. Hashtag Belial. A villain forged by vengeance. The sequel's antagonist, Belial, is not a one-dimensional villain but a deeply tragic figure. A former witch hunter turned witch himself, he embodies the corruption of purpose. His backstory, slowly revealed, involves betrayal by the order that once revered him. His turn to dark magic is painted not as power hunger, but as a desperate quest for justice against a hypocritical system. Belial's complexity lies in his mirroring of Calder. Both are immortals who have suffered losses and both seek an end to a seemingly eternal struggle. But while Calder seeks balance, Belial seeks destruction. Their ideological clash provides the film's philosophical core. In the end, Belial's death feels less like a triumph and more like a grim reflection of what Calder might have become under different circumstances. ### supporting characters, anchors and foils. Several secondary characters also receive significant development. Dolan 38th, Elijah Wood, returns in a more hardened, skeptical form after years of witnessing supernatural horrors. His growing disillusionment contrasts with his former wide-eyed faith, offering a human anchor to Calder's mythic journey. The Witch Queen's spirit, a remnant of the original film's antagonist, appears in Chloe's visions, whispering cryptic warnings. This spectral presence functions as both a cautionary symbol and a reminder that evil, like memory, never truly dies. ### relational dynamics and emotional stakes. Character relationships are at the heart of the sequel's emotional power. Themes of trust, redemption, betrayal, and lineage thread through every major interaction. Calder's hesitancy to form attachments is tested repeatedly. Chloe's emerging leadership is challenged by her need for Calder's approval, but eventually transcends it. Even Belial's madness is born from a twisted sense of loyalty. Every major arc feeds into the story's ultimate meditation. Can individuals overcome the past, or are they bound to repeat the cycle of violence and vengeance? ### conclusion. The Last Witch Hunter 2 excels in character development by giving its supernatural protagonists relatable human emotions and arcs. It transforms mythic figures into layered individuals, each with their own burdens, motivations, and transformations. Through Calder's sacrifice, Chloe's empowerment, and Belial's fall, the film elevates its fantasy action narrative into a deeper exploration of immortality, legacy, and the struggle for inner peace amidst eternal conflict. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, the performances by both the lead and supporting cast play a pivotal role in grounding the film's high-concept fantasy within a realm of emotional believability and character-driven drama. While the narrative continues the supernatural saga established in the first film, the sequel provides more room for the actors to explore deeper character arcs, emotional complexity, and inter-character relationships. ### Vin Diesel as Calder. Vin Diesel returns as Calder, the immortal witch hunter burdened by centuries of loneliness and haunted memories. Diesel's performance in the sequel is significantly more layered than in the original. He leans into the emotional weariness and stoic nobility of the character, portraying Calder not merely as a weapon of the axe and cross, but as a deeply scarred man wrestling with his humanity. Diesel brings a gravitas to the role that anchors the film. His subtle expressions, grief when confronting his past, restrained fury in battle, and quiet vulnerability in intimate moments, elevate Calder from a typical action hero to a tragic figure. Particularly moving is his interaction with a child witch in a pivotal scene, where Diesel sheds the tough exterior and conveys a rare softness that deepens the audience's empathy. ### Rose Leslie as Chloe. Reprising her role as Chloe, Rose Leslie delivers a performance that blends mystical strength with emotional resonance. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, Chloe has matured into a more assertive and confident dreamwalker, and Leslie captures this transformation with finesse. Her chemistry with Diesel feels more grounded and sincere in this sequel, shifting from tentative partnership to mutual trust. Leslie particularly shines in a confrontation with the film's antagonist, where she channels both raw fear and fierce defiance, showcasing the internal tug-of-war between her pacifist instincts and her sense of duty. ### New additions *## Idris Elba as Malachi, the ancient warlock. Idris Elba joins the franchise as Malachi, an enigmatic warlock with ties to Calder's origin. Elba's magnetic screen presence and baritone voice bring immediate authority and mystery to the role. He plays Malachi with a quiet intensity, oscillating between mentor, adversary, and reluctant ally. His nuanced delivery of arcane exposition avoids melodrama and instead gives mythological weight to the world building. A standout scene features Elba confronting his character's guilt for past betrayals. His controlled performance adds thematic richness to the story's exploration of redemption. Anya Kalatra as Isolde, the Witch Queen Reborn. Anya Kalatra delivers a fierce and emotionally charged performance as Isolde, the reincarnation of the original Witch Queen. Her portrayal is both haunting and sympathetic, avoiding the trap of the evil sorceress trope. Kalatra imbues Isolde with a tragic dignity, often speaking more through her eyes and posture than through dialogue. In scenes opposite Diesel, Kalatra creates a fascinating dynamic, part adversarial, part romantic, which challenges Calder's moral certainty. Her climactic breakdown, when forced to choose between vengeance and peace, becomes one of the film's most powerful emotional beats. Supporting cast and ensemble strength. The supporting cast, including Michael Caine's brief but impactful return as Dolan 36 and a fresh-faced Dolan 37, played by Jacob Anderson, adds continuity and generational depth. Anderson balances youthful enthusiasm with a sense of reverence for Calder, and their mentor-student interactions lend warmth to the darker tone of the film. Several minor characters, including coven leaders and magical historians, are given just enough individuality to avoid becoming mere plot devices. The ensemble's collective commitment to the fantasy world, through accents, body language, and a sincere embrace of the lore, helps maintain immersion throughout. Overall evaluation. From a third-person perspective, The Last Witch Hunter 2 benefits immensely from its cast's dedication and elevated performances. Diesel's deepened portrayal of Calder serves as the emotional cornerstone, while Leslie, Elba, and Kalatra offer compelling character work that enhances the sequel's thematic depth. The film could have easily been overwhelmed by its visual effects and myth-heavy exposition, but the cast's grounded performances ensure that the narrative remains character-driven and emotionally resonant. In many ways, it is the strength of these performances, not just the action or the fantasy, that cements the sequel as a more mature and dramatically satisfying continuation of the franchise. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Direction analysis. From a third-person perspective. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, the director serves as the essential architect of tone, mood, and narrative flow, crafting a visual and emotional landscape that elevates the film from a standard fantasy sequel into a more ambitious and textured cinematic experience. While remaining grounded in the action fantasy genre, the director's vision introduces a darker, more atmospheric tone than its predecessor, giving the sequel both visual maturity and thematic depth. Tone and mood. From the film's opening moments, the director establishes a tone of brooding mysticism and ancient menace. Instead of relying purely on high-octane fantasy spectacle, the direction leans into moodier sequences. Shadowy cathedrals, candlelit arcane chambers, and surreal dreamscapes are emphasized, using lighting and color grading to evoke a constant tension between the modern and the mythic. The use of deep blue and amber hues creates a palette that reflects the duality of Calder's existence, a man living in a contemporary world haunted by primordial forces. Music cues and ambient sound design are also employed with a deft touch. The director ensures that each set piece is not only visually compelling but acoustically resonant, adding to the immersive quality of the film's supernatural setting. Emotional undertones are heightened in scenes of loss, revelation, or temptation, reflecting a tonal sophistication beyond the surface action. Stylistic choices. The director's stylistic choices, particularly in shot composition and scene transitions, give The Last Witch Hunter 2 a distinct cinematic identity. Long, gliding tracking shots follow characters through environments that often feel alive with arcane energy. The camera lingers on relics, ancient texts, and magical symbols, reinforcing the mythological weight of the narrative. In moments of magical confrontation, the director frequently blends practical effects with CGI in a seamless fashion, opting for grounded realism within the fantasy framework. One unique flourish involves the use of mirrored imagery and circular motifs throughout the film, echoing themes of resurrection, entrapment, and destiny. These recurring visual cues provide an almost subconscious narrative rhythm, reinforcing the cyclical nature of Calder's curse and his confrontation with returning evils. Additionally, the director utilizes flashbacks and visions not as mere exposition but as windows into Calder's fractured psyche. These sequences are often stylized with altered frame rates, surreal lighting, and symbolic imagery, giving them a mythic quality that sets them apart from the linear plot. Pacing and narrative vision. Narratively, the film benefits from a more confident and deliberate pacing than the first installment. The director balances slow-burning suspense with bursts of kinetic action, ensuring that the story unfolds organically rather than in forced episodic beats. Emotional character moments are not rushed. Instead, they are allowed to breathe, particularly in scenes involving Calder's past, his growing weariness, and his evolving relationship with his allies. The pacing reflects a thematic focus on legacy, sacrifice, and the burden of immortality. The director's vision is clear. This is not simply an action-driven fantasy, but a mythic character study cloaked in witchfire and steel. Even the climactic battle resists becoming a chaotic blur. It is choreographed with narrative stakes in mind, keeping the viewer emotionally anchored. Final thoughts. In shaping The Last Witch Hunter 2, the director elevates the material through atmospheric control, stylistic flair, and a sharpened narrative instinct. The film's tone is haunting yet heroic, its mood drenched in both wonder and weariness. With bold visual compositions, symbolic subtext, and thoughtful pacing, the direction transforms the sequel into a more ambitious and resonant fantasy experience, anchored not just by spectacle but by soul. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Cinematography analysis. From a third-person perspective in great detail. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, the cinematography emerges as a critical storytelling device, heightening the atmosphere, reinforcing themes, and immersing the viewer in a world that oscillates between the ancient and the modern, the mystical and the mundane. Under the eye of the cinematographer, every camera angle, lighting setup, and framing choice is carefully calibrated to enhance the film's dark fantasy aesthetic and drive its emotional and narrative arcs. Camera angles and movement. Throughout the film, dynamic camera angles are employed to emphasize both scale and power. Low-angle shots are frequently used when portraying Calder, Vin Diesel, imbuing his character with a sense of mythic dominance. Conversely, high-angle shots are deployed when showing the vulnerability of mortals or moments when characters confront supernatural forces beyond their control. The director and cinematographer often utilize steady tracking shots during action sequences, allowing the choreography and environment to shine without disorienting the viewer. A welcome departure from the shaky cam chaos that plagues many genre films. Perhaps most notable is the use of sweeping crane and drone shots to transition between locations, be it the bustling neon-lit city streets or the ancient, crumbling ruins hidden in forgotten forests. These wide, cinematic movements create a palpable sense of scale and transport the audience effortlessly between timelines and dimensions. Lighting and color palette. Lighting plays a pivotal role in shaping The Last Witch Hunter 2's tone. A clear dichotomy is established between light and dark, both literally and metaphorically. Cold, desaturated blue and gray tones dominate the contemporary urban scenes, evoking a feeling of loneliness and decay. In contrast, warm amber and golden hues envelop flashbacks to Calder's past and the Witch Queen's lair, symbolizing memory, magic, and ancient power. Candlelight and flickering flames are used deliberately during incantation scenes and within the underground enclaves of witches, casting unpredictable shadows that mirror the narrative's uncertainty. Practical lighting, torches, glowing runes, and bioluminescent spell effects creates an immersive visual world that feels both tactile and ethereal. The interplay between darkness and illumination is most effectively realized in a scene where Calder ventures into the shadow realm. Here, the lighting design grows increasingly abstract. Faces are partially lit with sharp chiaroscuro, while the backgrounds melt into black voids. This visual minimalism heightens tension and keeps the viewer on edge, unsure of what may emerge from the darkness. Framing and composition. Framing is used with intelligence and symbolic intention. Tight close-ups draw attention to Calder's stoic expressions, conveying layers of grief and isolation that dialogue cannot express. Wide compositions frequently position Calder as a small figure amid towering cathedrals or ancient trees, visually reinforcing the theme of one man against time and fate. Foreground-background contrasts are also key. Magical artifacts and spellglyphs are often placed in the extreme foreground to signal their narrative significance, while the characters interact in the midground. This layered visual approach adds texture and depth, particularly in scenes involving ancient rituals or confrontations between factions of witches. There is also a strong use of symmetry in many of the magical locations. The symmetry in temple halls, witch circles, and vision sequences provides a sense of eerie, otherworldly order, suggesting that these mystical forces obey their own laws of nature, separate from human logic. Visually striking moments. Several moments in The Last Witch Hunter 2 stand out as visually arresting. The Witch Queen's resurrection. A high-speed dollion paired with strobe lighting creates a moment of almost unbearable intensity. The Queen's rise is captured in slow motion, her flowing garments blending with a burst of gold and crimson light that floods the chamber, symbolizing the return of primeval chaos. The Time Rift sequence. In a dreamlike sequence where Calder experiences visions from the past, the frame rate fluctuates, and the image splinters into mirrored fragments before coalescing into a seamless whole. The use of prism effects and distorted lenses makes the entire sequence feel like a memory being forcibly reassembled. The Final Duel. Bathed in a halo of moonlight and framed by collapsing ruins, the climactic battle is visually poetic. Aerial shots circle around the duel, while wide shots silhouette the figures against a shattered skyline. The interplay of fire, ash, and reflective surfaces creates a tableau of destruction and transcendence. Conclusion. In sum, the cinematography of The Last Witch Hunter 2 does more than just support the film's narrative. It elevates it. Through meticulous control over angles, lighting, and composition, the visual language reinforces the epic, supernatural tone of the story while grounding its characters in emotional realism. The result is a richly textured cinematic experience where every frame contributes to the spellbinding world-building and mythic resonance of Calder's journey. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Editing and pacing analysis. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, the editing and pacing play pivotal roles in shaping the film's overall rhythm, immersiveness, and tonal consistency. From the first frame to the climactic finale, the editing style reflects a deliberate effort to balance frenetic action with moments of introspective calm, enhancing both narrative clarity and emotional resonance. #1. Flow and structural cohesion ***. The film unfolds with a well-structured momentum, thanks to tightly assembled sequences that avoid the common pitfalls of sequel fatigue. The editing ensures that plot developments unfold in a logical and digestible manner. Transitions between the various timelines, the ancient past, the modern day, and flashbacks into Calder's memories, are handled with fluid cross-cutting and dissolves, allowing viewers to stay oriented even as the story navigates through layered lore. Montage is used sparingly but effectively to condense exposition-heavy sequences, particularly when dealing with the mythology of witch clans or the protagonist's centuries-long burden. Rather than overloading viewers with dense dialogue, the editors let visual storytelling carry much of the weight, using images of ancient scrolls, magical runes, and symbolic hallucinations to accelerate narrative understanding. #2. Seamless transitions versus abrupt cuts ***. Much of the film features seamless transitions, particularly during high-stakes set pieces. Action sequences are edited with precision, rapid yet never incoherent. Quick cuts are balanced with longer sweeping camera moves that let the choreography breathe. A standout example is the battle beneath the catacombs, where the editing rhythm mirrors Calder's combat tempo. Deliberate and heavy when he's strategizing, but fast and disorienting when chaos erupts. However, there are a few instances, particularly in the mid-second act, where editing choices slightly disrupt the flow. Scenes involving political maneuvering between which factions occasionally feel rushed, as though trimmed to avoid runtime bloat. As a result, Some secondary character arcs receive abrupt conclusions or jarring scene exits that dilute their narrative importance. These moments, while brief, introduce minor pacing stumbles in an otherwise cohesive structure. ###3. Pacing dynamics and engagement ****. The film exhibits a controlled rise and fall rhythm, carefully alternating between explosive action and character-driven drama. The first act leans into a slower tension-building pace, establishing a darker, more mature tone than its predecessor. This pays off in the second act, where the momentum accelerates with successive confrontations, reveals, and magical threats. Importantly, the film knows when to pause and breathe. Between the battles and spellcasting, it inserts contemplative silences, lingering shots on Calder's aging expression, or his quiet conversations with allies about memory, loss, and the curse of immortality. These slower beats enrich the emotional core and prevent the film from feeling like a relentless sprint. The climax, while visually intense, never feels overlong thanks to rhythmic editing that intercuts the main battle with parallel story threads, rituals, betrayals, and a race against time. Each sequence is timed to maximize suspense without overstaying its welcome. ###4. Emotional and narrative impact ****. The editing heightens emotional impact by allowing reactions to land. A death scene isn't just cut away after the final blow. There's a moment held for the aftermath. The grief, the silence, the shift in tone. Similarly, narrative twists are underscored with tight editing that withholds or reveals just enough information to create dramatic irony or surprise. In terms of character arcs, particularly Calder's, the editorial pacing reflects his internal conflict. Flashbacks are layered in at strategic moments, using parallel editing to show how past traumas shape his present decisions. This temporal interplay deepens his arc and prevents the film from becoming a simple linear adventure. ###Conclusion. In summary, The Last Witch Hunter 2 features skillful, polished editing that supports its complex fantasy world without sacrificing clarity or emotional depth. While a few transitions may feel abrupt, particularly with secondary characters, the overall pacing is dynamic and purposeful. The film's rhythm allows its action to thrill, its drama to resonate, and its mythos to unfold in a way that feels both cinematic and intimate. The editors, through a balance of restraint and spectacle, help elevate the sequel beyond mere genre exercise into something with genuine storytelling weight. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Soundtrack and score analysis. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, the soundtrack and original score serve as a powerful atmospheric engine, driving the emotional resonance and narrative intensity of the film. The composers, returning with a fusion of orchestral gravitas and modern dark fantasy textures, craft a sonic landscape that mirrors the film's blend of ancient mysticism and contemporary fantasy action. The music rarely calls attention to itself, yet its presence is unmistakably pivotal in anchoring the film's tone, transitions, and dramatic peaks. ###Atmosphere and world building. The score excels at world building from the opening frames. Deep, brooding strings mixed with ambient choral layers usher audiences back into the haunted arcane world of Calder, the immortal witch hunter. Ancient instruments like the hurdy-gurdy, dulcimer, and throat singing subtly punctuate the soundscape, evoking a primeval sense of dread and wonder. These textures create an immersive bridge between the mythic elements and the gritty urban setting, sustaining a balance between the spiritual and the modern. ###Emotional undercurrents and character themes. Each central character is subtly paired with a leitmotif, recurring musical cues that evolve alongside their emotional arcs. Calder's theme, introduced in the original film, returns with a matured, mournful variation. Deeper horns and minimalist piano now reflect his growing weariness and inner conflict. Chloe's motif has grown more complex too, shifting from airy harp-driven mysticism into darker synth-infused progressions as her powers deepen and her role in the narrative intensifies. The antagonist's theme is especially noteworthy, an eerie, rising tonal motif that feels almost organic in its unpredictability, often accompanied by dissonant strings and whispered vocalizations. It's used sparingly but effectively, heightening tension whenever the villain's influence spreads. Standout compositions and set pieces. Several set pieces in The Last Witch Hunter 2 are elevated by standout musical compositions. The Catacombs confrontation. Here, the score swells from near silence into a thunderous clash of percussion and distorted cello as Calder confronts a resurrected witch sect. The music mirrors his desperation and rage, punctuated by rhythmic pauses that emphasize key action beats. Chloe's vision sequence. This surreal scene is accompanied by one of the most hauntingly beautiful compositions, a minimalist piano melody overlaid with reversed vocals and electronic ambience. It lends the sequence a dreamlike unease, intensifying its emotional and narrative importance. The final ritual. The climactic fusion of choir, tribal drums, and modern electronic elements crescendos into a near-operatic finale. Rather than overshadowing the scene, the music underlines the stakes while reinforcing the emotional gravity of the characters' sacrifices and triumphs. Use of silence and subtlety. Equally impactful is the film's strategic use of silence. In scenes of tension or grief, the absence of score amplifies the actors' performances. For example, during a scene where Calder confronts his own mortality, the sound design strips away the orchestral elements entirely, focusing instead on ambient sound and breath, an auditory void that magnifies the moment's introspection. Integration with the narrative. Crucially, the score never overwhelms the film. Instead, it breathes with the narrative, ebbing and surging in harmony with story beats. The transitions between dialogue, action, and introspective moments are made fluid through careful sound design. The music complements without competing, an artful balance that speaks to the director's trust in his composer and the editor's restraint. Conclusion. In summary, the soundtrack and score of The Last Witch Hunter 2 play a masterful role in shaping the film's identity. With richly textured compositions, nuanced character motifs, and a keen awareness of when to amplify or recede, the music deepens the emotional stakes and enhances the supernatural tension. It's an example of score storytelling, where every note, silence, and swell is in service of the film's larger mythos and mood. The Last Witch Hunter 2, Themes and Messages. A deep analysis. The Last Witch Hunter 2 delves into a rich tapestry of themes, balancing supernatural spectacle with introspective philosophical undercurrents. As a sequel, it expands on the foundation of immortality, loss, and the fragile coexistence between the magical and mortal worlds, offering a more mature and layered thematic approach than its predecessor. The film's narrative threads are infused with meditations on duty, identity, trauma, and the burden of eternal life, each rendered through both explicit storytelling and nuanced subtext. #1. The burden of immortality ****. At the heart of the film is Calder's continued struggle with immortality. Unlike other fantasy heroes who revel in their powers, Calder is depicted as a weary guardian, forever trapped in time, emotionally isolated, and psychologically burdened. His immortality is framed not as a gift but as a curse. Through dream sequences and dialogue with new characters, the film interrogates what it means to outlive everyone and everything one loves. The loss of connection, fading purpose, and psychological erosion over centuries create a tragic yet compelling portrait of an immortal man's existential crisis. Effectiveness. This theme is deeply woven into the script and elevated by Vin Diesel's introspective performance. The filmmakers avoid romanticizing eternal life, instead presenting it with a sobering realism that leaves a lasting impression. #2. The cost of power ****. A recurring motif in The Last Witch Hunter 2 is the steep price attached to wielding power, whether magical, political, or personal. The sequel introduces new witch factions that blur the lines between good and evil, challenging Calder's binary understanding of magic. Characters who seek power to right perceived wrongs end up corrupted or destroyed, suggesting that ambition without humility leads to ruin. Effectiveness. This message is subtly encoded into the arcs of secondary characters, especially the antagonist, who begins with noble intentions but devolves into darkness. The film critiques not just the misuse of power, but the seductive nature of power itself. ###3. Redemption and Reconciliation ****. Calder's arc in the sequel is one of personal redemption. Haunted by choices from the past, including betrayals and sacrifices made in the name of duty, he embarks on a journey not just to stop a magical threat, but to reclaim his humanity. This includes reconciling with witches who were once his enemies and grappling with his role in perpetuating cycles of violence. ***effectiveness***. The theme resonates most through Calder's growing bond with a young witch apprentice, who symbolizes the hope for a future where witches and humans coexist peacefully. Their evolving relationship injects emotional weight and serves as a metaphor for bridging ancient divides. ###4. Memory and Identity ****. The sequel also explores how memory shapes identity. Calder's fragmented recollections of his distant past, some real, some distorted by centuries of grief, are crucial to the narrative. Magic in this film is tied to memory. Spells can restore, erase, or weaponize it. Calder's search for truth involves recovering lost memories, which in turn forces him to confront parts of himself he had buried. ***effectiveness***. Through dreamlike visuals and magical hallucinations, the film effectively visualizes this theme. It raises intriguing questions about how much of ourselves is tied to what we remember, and what happens when those memories are altered or lost. ###5. Humanity versus Monstrosity ****. In a genre where witches are often portrayed as one-dimensional villains, The Last Witch Hunter 2 subverts expectations by humanizing them. Many witches are shown as victims of persecution, protectors of ancient knowledge, or individuals simply trying to survive. The real monstrosity, the film suggests, lies in intolerance, ignorance, and unchecked vengeance. ***effectiveness***. This reversal adds moral complexity. By presenting sympathetic witches and morally ambiguous humans, the film challenges audiences to question who the real monsters are. The message feels timely and relevant, especially in a world still grappling with issues of otherness and prejudice. ###conclusion. A thematically resonant sequel. While The Last Witch Hunter 2 remains grounded in action fantasy traditions, with spellcasting battles, dark forests, and shadowy covens, it distinguishes itself by embedding genuine thematic weight within its narrative structure. Its core themes of immortality, redemption, memory, and the cost of power are delivered with both stylistic flair and emotional depth. While some secondary ideas, such as ecological metaphors or anti-authoritarian subtext, may feel underdeveloped or overshadowed by spectacle, the film's central messages resonate strongly. Ultimately, The Last Witch Hunter 2 isn't just a fantasy romp. It's a meditation on what it means to live, to remember, and to choose compassion in a world of chaos. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Visual effects and CGI analysis. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, visual effects, VFX, and CGI serve as key storytelling tools, vital to constructing its dark fantasy world of ancient magic, cursed relics, and supernatural warfare. The film's VFX team, building upon the stylistic foundation of its 2015 predecessor, expands the visual mythology with significantly more polish and ambition. The question is not whether the effects are impressive in scope, most certainly they are, but whether they successfully integrate into the narrative and visual style of the film, or if they threaten to overpower it. #### Seamless world building or overindulgence. From a third-person perspective, the CGI largely blends naturally with the film's grim, arcane atmosphere. Towering cursed trees, swirling portals, shadowy familiars, and sentient plagues are all brought to life with a richly textured digital finesse. The digital sorcery complements the lore-heavy tone of the narrative, offering audiences a coherent visual language where spells ripple with arcane symbols and demonic entities emerge from folds in reality. Notably, the VFX does not appear as an afterthought, but as an integrated design language. Colors, textures, and physics consistently match the cinematography's brooding palette and moody lighting. Where the effects shine brightest is in environmental augmentation. Collapsing ruins, illusionary dreamscapes, and magical duels all feel immersive without shattering the suspension of disbelief. For instance, when Calder is thrown into a vision of his past by a memory-weaving witch, the environment warps with organic, fluid transitions that avoid the sharp, synthetic edge seen in lesser fantasy films. This natural blending enhances the mythic tone and adds to the immersion. Enhancement versus distraction. However, there are moments when the visual effects veer toward excess. Particularly in the film's climax, a demon of chaos is summoned in a cataclysmic eruption of fire, decay, and collapsing reality. While visually grand, the chaos occasionally feels overwhelming. Its rapid, explosive editing and digital noise undercut emotional beats. Rather than enhancing the dread and stakes, these sequences risk numbing the viewer. In these high-stakes moments, the CGI borders on spectacle for spectacle's sake, potentially detracting from character-driven tension. Additionally, some creature designs, especially mid-tier demons and lesser spectral entities, lean too heavily on computer-generated rendering, lacking the tactile weight or physical presence of practical effects. The CGI sheen is occasionally at odds with the film's otherwise grounded texture, pulling the viewer out of the gritty realism established earlier. Practical versus digital effects. What sets The Last Witch Hunter 2 apart from many CGI-heavy contemporaries is its commitment to blending digital and practical effects. Close-up scenes involving enchanted weapons, occult rituals, or infected corpses often rely on prosthetics and makeup, which ground the fantastical elements in a physical world. For example, the transformation of a cursed priest into a twisted wraith is done through a mix of latex appliances and digital enhancements. The practical base allows for more expressive actor performance, while the CGI adds supernatural motion or glowing runes without eclipsing the human element. Moreover, fire-based effects, always a challenge to render convincingly, are frequently done with on-set pyrotechnics supplemented with subtle CGI. This restrained use keeps magical combat visceral and tangible rather than overly glossy or abstract. Final evaluation. In great detail, The Last Witch Hunter 2 uses its visual effects not simply as visual candy, but as a serious storytelling device, mostly to great success. The CGI-enhanced magic system feels consistent, grounded, and layered within the rules of the film's world. When paired with practical effects, the visuals become richer, more believable, and emotionally engaging. However, the film does suffer from occasional overindulgence, particularly in moments designed to dazzle rather than deepen. Still, the overall effect is one of immersive spectacle, proving that when VFX is aligned with story, tone, and world building, it can elevate genre storytelling rather than overshadow it. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Set design and locations analysis. Explored from a third-person perspective in great detail. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, the set design and location choices play a pivotal role in immersing the audience into a world teetering between ancient magic and modern reality. Much like its predecessor, the sequel leans heavily into an atmospheric fusion of Gothic architecture, arcane symbols, and urban grit, but this time with broader ambition and deeper visual complexity. Authenticity and world building through design. The film's production design reflects a layered world of hidden magical societies that coexist with the mundane modern world. The sets are richly textured, blending medieval relics with contemporary urban elements, underscoring the timelessness of Calder's journey. From the subterranean lairs of witch covens, lined with enchanted runes, obscure relics, and flickering alchemical light, to the sleek glass towers of corporate entities that secretly deal in sorcery, the design constantly reinforces the tension between ancient and modern forces. Each prop is carefully chosen and appears aged or imbued with a sense of mystical history. Grimoires bound in serpent hide, staffs carved with centuries-old curses, and enchanted artifacts, the spaces, not merely as decoration but as storytelling tools. These tangible details lend credibility to the magical realism of the world and give each location a lived-in quality. Symbolic and functional use of locations. One of the most visually compelling aspects of The Last Witch Hunter 2 is its use of location to reflect character psychology and thematic stakes. When Calder ventures into the ruins of a forgotten witch prison deep beneath the Arctic Circle, the desolate, icebound environment mirrors the emotional isolation he grapples with. In contrast, a lush, overgrown cathedral reclaimed by nature hints at themes of rebirth and nature's ancient power reclaiming its dominance. Urban locations, shot in a stylized version of New York, possibly with composite shots from other European cities, are darkly atmospheric, lit with arcane glows or neon tinges. These settings contribute to the noir magical tone of the narrative. Rooftop sequences overlooking stormy skylines, labyrinthine alleyways with ancient sigils carved into brick walls, and museums hiding otherworldly vaults all serve to escalate tension while deepening the mythos. ##### Visual composition and cinematic appeal. From a cinematic standpoint, the set design achieves striking visuals. Dim candlelit chambers open into wide, high-ceilinged catacombs with cascading shadows, scenes often framed to create a sense of awe and danger. Verticality is emphasized, whether in towering magical libraries or skyscraping sanctuaries, to suggest the spiritual and hierarchical dimensions of the witch world. Furthermore, the film wisely contrasts confined ancient spaces with vast, modern ones, reminding the viewer of the uneasy coexistence of magic and modernity. The transition between locations is seamless thanks to both physical set extensions and digital enhancements. The synergy of practical sets with subtle CGI augmentation ensures environments never feel artificial or overly fantastical, grounding the magic in something physically graspable. #### Practical versus digital craftsmanship. Where The Last Witch Hunter 2 particularly excels is in balancing practical set design with digital extensions. Witch temples, underground vaults, and ceremonial arenas are largely constructed physically, giving actors tactile elements to interact with. This realism enhances performances and makes the stakes more palpable. CGI is reserved for magical effects and supernatural spatial distortions, allowing the set design to shine without being overshadowed by visual effects. For instance, a climactic confrontation set in a forgotten cathedral is mostly practical, with stained glass windows casting enchanted light, broken pews scattered across the floor, and creeping vines entwined with magical glyphs. Digital fire and spectral apparitions add flair, but the heart of the environment remains tangible and haunting. #### Conclusion. In sum, the set design and location choices in The Last Witch Hunter 2 are more than just a backdrop. They are integral to the story's emotional and thematic resonance. Each environment enriches the narrative by grounding it in a textured, visually compelling world that feels both ancient and alive. Through carefully curated props, thoughtfully designed spaces, and dynamic use of real-world and fantasy locations, the film creates a believable universe that deepens immersion and leaves a lasting impression. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Dialogue and script analysis. Third-person perspective. In-depth discussion. In The Last Witch Hunter 2, the dialogue serves as a critical bridge between its dark fantasy atmosphere and the emotional grounding of its characters. From ancient incantations to modern banter, the film's script oscillates between mythic gravitas and contemporary wit. Though the writing doesn't always maintain a consistent rhythm, it delivers enough sharp, character-defining lines and thematic resonance to enhance the narrative weight of the sequel. ####1. Tone and style of the dialogue ****. The film retains the somber, brooding tone established by its predecessor, but with notable refinements. The dialogue is steeped in arcane language and historical references, lending credibility to its centuries-old lore. However, it avoids becoming overly expository by balancing these moments with grounded, modern expressions, particularly in scenes involving Calder's interactions with his new allies or younger hunters. There is a clear intent to blend the mystical and the mundane. For instance, ancient rituals are interrupted by dry, sardonic remarks from Calder or his companions, showcasing a script that understands the need to humanize its high fantasy premise. This juxtaposition of tones often creates moments of levity without undermining the stakes. ###2. Characterization through dialogue ****. The dialogue is one of the script's most effective tools in reinforcing character identity and development. Calder's lines continue to reflect his weariness, wisdom, and lingering grief. He speaks with precision and gravity, often allowing silence to weigh heavier than words. His monologues, particularly when discussing the burden of immortality or the cyclical nature of evil, are among the film's most poignant moments. For instance, in a quietly devastating exchange, Calder tells a young witch, "You think immortality is a gift. It's a sentence, written in fire, signed in blood." This line encapsulates his internal conflict and philosophical distance from the living. The supporting cast is also given space to shine through dialogue. A rebellious witch ally, driven by vengeance, peppers her lines with bitter sarcasm that slowly softens as trust builds. Meanwhile, the antagonist's speech is carefully crafted to mirror manipulation and grandeur, echoing the archaic cadence of long-forgotten gods, underscoring his detachment from human morality. ###3. Memorable lines and emotional impact ****. Several lines rise above the fantastical setting to strike emotional or thematic chords. One of the standout exchanges comes near the climax, when Calder confronts the villain not with power, but with truth. Power isn't what makes you eternal. It's what leaves you alone. Here, the dialogue deepens the film's meditation on isolation, identity, and sacrifice. Another standout moment occurs during a tense reunion between Calder and a reincarnated version of an old ally. Their dialogue blends cryptic familiarity and emotional subtext, showing how the script uses implication and shared history rather than exposition. While not all lines are equally sharp, some exposition-heavy scenes bog down in lore, there is a conscious effort to ensure that the most pivotal moments resonate both narratively and emotionally. ###4. Wit, humor, and relief ****. Despite its grim setting, the script smartly integrates humor, often through Calder's dry wit or a sidekick's irreverent commentary. This comic relief feels organic, never forced, and offers respite without derailing the atmosphere. For example, "You ever try telling a banshee to shut up? Doesn't go well. Learned that the hard way, in Dublin." Such lines build character history while keeping the tone agile. ###5. Script structure and pacing ****. Structurally, the screenplay is tightly written, using dialogue economically to move the story forward while also enriching the world-building. The mythology unfolds through layered conversations, flashback-triggering riddles, and cryptic warnings. It avoids large info dumps by embedding exposition into moments of character tension or discovery. Even secondary characters are given distinct voices, with regional dialects, magical idioms, and personal motivations coming through clearly. This creates a linguistic tapestry that feels lived in and immersive. ###conclusion. The Last Witch Hunter 2's script strikes a strong balance between world-building and character introspection. Its dialogue alternates between poetic and practical, infused with ancient resonance and modern disillusionment. While not every scene lands with equal impact, the script delivers memorable lines, nuanced emotional exchanges, and sharp thematic reflections. Ultimately, the dialogue reinforces the film's core identity, an epic tale of endurance and sacrifice, told through voices shaped by fire, time, and shadow. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Genre execution. The Last Witch Hunter 2 operates squarely within the fantasy action genre, yet its execution reveals a complex relationship with genre conventions, both embracing familiar tropes and pushing against them in key moments. From a third-person perspective, the film showcases a confident grasp of genre mechanics, but its success lies in how it refreshes its mythos and rhythmically blends action, supernatural intrigue, and emotional character work. ###following and subverting conventions. On the surface, the film follows expected genre beats. an immortal protagonist, arcane rituals, shadowy councils, and a world teetering on the brink of magical catastrophe. These are staples of dark fantasy and urban supernatural fiction. However, The Last Witch Hunter 2 subtly subverts the genre by humanizing its immortal hero more than its predecessor. Calder, once a stoic and invincible figure, is now wearied by time and visibly scarred by his isolation. The sequel emphasizes emotional vulnerability, shifting from the invulnerable warrior archetype to a more fractured, introspective protector. The film also retools its villains. Rather than a single dark sorceress or monstrous antagonist, the sequel presents a fractured coven struggling with internal moral dilemmas. This splintered antagonist dynamic adds moral ambiguity to the narrative, avoiding the cliché of a monolithic evil force. In doing so, The Last Witch Hunter 2 introduces thematic freshness and subverts the conventional good versus evil dichotomy typical of the genre. #### fresh ideas versus clichés. While the core plot, a new dark magic threat rising, is familiar, the script layers it with intriguing new ideas. Spell-forged memory prisons, ghostly archives of forgotten witch history, and alchemical time fractures that allow for haunting glimpses into Calder's centuries-long past. These elements expand the mythology in inventive ways, giving the world more texture and depth than the original film. However, there are moments where the film leans too heavily into genre clichés, particularly in some of the dialogue. You have no idea what's coming, or it's always darkest before the dawn, and in certain action setups, like a mid-film battle in a crumbling cathedral that feels too formulaic despite the supernatural setting. Even so, The Last Witch Hunter 2 largely avoids overused fantasy tropes like the chosen one narrative or the damsel in distress. The female characters, notably a reformed witch ally and a skeptical magical historian, are fully realized, active participants in the story rather than sidekicks or foils. Their agency helps freshen the familiar quest structure. ### balancing action, suspense, humor and drama. The film exhibits a stronger tonal balance than its predecessor. The action is choreographed with kinetic energy, blending CGI with practical stunt work to maintain physical weight and impact. Set pieces are distributed with an effective rhythm, never overwhelming the viewer, but providing regular escalations in stakes. The use of fire magic, gravity-distorting spells, and enchanted relics during combat keeps battles imaginative. Suspense is maintained through a non-linear approach to exposition. Flashbacks are inserted not just for backstory but as part of a magical mechanism, memory extraction scenes that merge character development with narrative intrigue. This framing keeps the audience guessing while grounding the mystical lore in personal stakes. The film also introduces a dry, mordant sense of humor. Calder's deadpan sarcasm contrasts well with the earnestness of newer characters, offering levity without breaking the tone. One standout moment, a tense negotiation with a time-bending witch, is undercut by a sudden magical malfunction, eliciting laughter but also reinforcing the unpredictability of magic. Drama, meanwhile, is anchored in themes of legacy, mortality, and identity. Calder's long life is not portrayed as enviable but as an existential burden, and the film leans into this melancholy with sincerity. Emotional scenes, particularly those involving Calder's memories of long-dead comrades, are rendered with restraint, avoiding melodrama while adding emotional depth. ### conclusion. In sum, The Last Witch Hunter 2 executes its genre with surprising nuance. While it adheres to many fantasy action conventions, heroic quests, mystical battles, ancient evils, it resists becoming formulaic through character introspection, imaginative world-building, and thoughtful subversions. By weaving suspense, action, and grounded emotional arcs into a familiar mythological framework, the film both honors and reinvigorates its genre. It's a sequel that understands its roots but isn't afraid to cast new spells. From a critical, third-person vantage point, The Last Witch Hunter 2 positions its supernatural action narrative as a vessel for a surprisingly expansive slate of social and cultural observations. Whether those observations feel organically embedded or thematically tacked on varies from strand to strand, yet the film is consistently ambitious in what it tries to say. ###1. Marginalized identities and politics of the other. The sequel doubles down on the first film's allegory of witches as persecuted minorities. Here, the coven functions less as a shadowy antagonist and more as a stand-in for any group that has been historically demonized. Immigrants, queer communities, or even whistleblowers. Natural integration. The script embeds this idea in character arcs. Young witch Leora's fear of registering with human authorities mirrors real-world anxieties over government watchlists, while Calder's gradual shift from hunter to advocate mirrors society's slow re-evaluation of once vilified groups. Forced moments. A televised Senate hearing climax, complete with on-the-nose speeches about tolerance, borders on didactic. Though thematically resonant, the scene trades subtle allegory for overt sermonizing, briefly stalling narrative momentum. #2. Surveillance, data mining, and state power. Set in a near-future New York where sorcery is tracked by predictive policing algorithms, the film's critique of surveillance capitalism proves one of its sharper commentaries. High-angle drone shots and HUD overlays visually reinforce, to almost oppressive degrees, the panoptic culture the protagonists resist. The subject dovetails with the plot's central MacGuffin, an arcane sigil network that can map latent magic in every citizen. This blends real and mystical seamlessly, making the cautionary subtext feel earned. However, exposition dumps via tech-savvy side character occasionally tip into lecture territory, underscoring the filmmaker's eagerness to ensure no viewer misses the analogy. #3. Ecomythology and climate anxiety. In contrast to the first installment's medieval plague metaphor, Part 2 pivots to environmental collapse. The witches' magic feeds on biodiversity, and corporate drilling in the Amazon threatens their power source. The ecological motif is threaded through production design. Patches of enchanted rainforest sprout in urban alleyways, visually marrying concrete blight with threatened green sanctuaries. The symbolism feels organic thanks to recurring visual juxtapositions. Every major action beat leaves behind either literal scorched earth or sudden bursts of flora, a neat shorthand for humanity's impact. The moral is clear but not simplistic. Witches themselves are split over whether to scorch humanity in revenge or collaborate on restoration, mirroring real-world debates within activist circles about radical versus incremental solutions. #4. Gender dynamics and toxic immortality. Calder's eternal life becomes a study in masculine isolation and emotional stagnation. The screenplay interrogates the trope of the ageless male hero by contrasting him with a council of female witches who age, evolve, and lead with communal intelligence. The film's strongest scene is a council debate filmed in a circular tracking shot. Calder's lone, static position literally frames him as alien to a more adaptive, matriarchal governance model. Yet an underdeveloped romantic subplot with Leora flirts with repeating old immortal rescues young woman clichés, partially undermining its progressive intent. #5. Post-colonial undercurrents. Flashbacks reveal that Calder's original crusade dovetailed with early modern colonial expansions. By staging 17th century witch hunts aboard trading vessels bound for the New World, the film links magical persecution with economic exploitation and forced displacement. This is handled mostly through atmospheric vignettes rather than dialogue, granting the message subtlety. Unfortunately, when these past atrocities are recounted in modern times, secondary characters voice them in a way that feels like a present-day essay read aloud, useful contextually but theatrically inert. #handling of sensitivity and complexity. The Last Witch Hunter 2 is commendably cautious with its real-world parallels. Hate crimes against witches are depicted without stylized voyeurism, and victims are given interiority rather than serving as shock fodder. The screenplay also avoids flattening its villains. The human antagonist, a data analytics mogul, is driven by warped utilitarian logic rather than cartoon villainy, inviting debate about ends and means. Where it falters is in its occasional impulse to vocalize its own subtext, trusting the audience a little less than it trusts its metaphors. Still, the film's earnestness and breadth of commentary outweigh those bumps. Sensitive topics. religious zealotry, eco-terrorism, civil liberty trade-offs, are treated with a seriousness that neither trivializes nor sensationalizes. Overall assessment. From a detached critic's standpoint, the sequel's social commentary is both a strength and a risk. It expands the franchise's mythos into a pointed mirror of contemporary fears and injustices. The majority of these themes, particularly surveillance and eco-mythology, are woven into the story world's very fabric, giving the adventure plot genuine stakes that echo beyond the screen. When the writing turns didactic, it momentarily exposes stitching, but the film's stylistic confidence and substantive ambition ensure its cultural critiques resonate more often than they clang. The Last Witch Hunter 2, audience engagement, in-depth analysis from a third-person perspective. The Last Witch Hunter 2 crafts its engagement with the audience through a multi-layered approach, blending visceral spectacle with character-driven storytelling. From the opening sequence to the climactic finale, the film employs an array of emotional and sensory hooks designed to generate strong reactions, ranging from awe and adrenaline to sorrow and philosophical curiosity. Its ability to resonate with viewers lies not just in high-octane action, but in the emotional grounding of its protagonist and the mythic themes it explores. #1. Emotional resonance and character investment ****. At the heart of the film lies Calder, the immortal witch hunter, whose burden of eternal life and loss remains a key emotional conduit. His interactions, especially those involving memories of his long-lost family, his uneasy alliance with modern witches, and his struggle to define purpose in a world that continues to change without him, tap into universally relatable themes of grief, loneliness, and identity. These moments are not mere backstory filler but are treated with solemn gravity and visual poetry, encouraging empathy and emotional investment. A standout emotional arc emerges when Calder is forced to confront a cursed version of his younger self, a spectral embodiment of who he used to be. This encounter does more than offer action. It reflects internal conflict, regret, and redemption. Such moments create deep resonance, prompting viewers to consider their own pasts and the costs of choices made. #2. Visceral reactions. Shock, excitement, and awe ****. The film excels in delivering set pieces that evoke strong sensory responses. From visually stunning magical duels to breathtaking transformations of urban landscapes into nightmarish dreamscapes, The Last Witch Hunter 2 is built to dazzle. Audiences are likely to respond with gasps during sudden betrayals, unexpected deaths, or reveals of hidden magical lore. Particularly shocking is the mid-film twist involving the betrayal of a trusted ally who is revealed to be bound to an ancient coven. This moment is delivered with narrative and visual precision, provoking genuine surprise. The sound design and musical cues also play a critical role. A recurring motif tied to Calder's lost family, when played during a pivotal emotional confrontation, can elicit tears or at least a somber introspection among viewers attuned to its layered symbolism. These cinematic tools elevate simple plot points into emotional beats that land with weight. #3. Humor, levity, and relatability ***. Though darker in tone than its predecessor, the sequel intersperses well-timed levity to balance the myth-heavy seriousness. Characters like the tech-savvy witch Chloe or a sarcastic guardian spirit bound to an ancient grimoire offer moments of wit that give the audience breathing space. These moments are not only funny but also humanizing, making the characters feel more grounded despite the fantastical setting. The banter between Calder and his unlikely allies creates a camaraderie that audiences can root for. It brings a sense of communal effort, hope, and resilience, values that resonate across audience demographics, especially in a world still healing from collective trauma and division. #4. Reflective themes and post-viewing discussion ****. Beneath the action fantasy surface, The Last Witch Hunter 2 invites discussion about mortality, the ethics of power, and the cost of vengeance. It poses questions such as, can ancient evils be reformed or must they be destroyed? Is eternal life a blessing or a curse? What defines identity when history is forgotten or rewritten? These questions linger after the credits roll, encouraging repeat viewings to catch foreshadowed elements or subtle philosophical cues. Moreover, the lore-rich world, filled with ancient orders, modern covens, and alternate dimensions, lends itself to fan theories and debate. Social media and fan forums are likely to buzz with speculation about hidden meanings, unexplored characters, and symbolic details. This level of engagement goes beyond passive viewership, transforming the film into a participatory experience. #5. Rewatchability and fan loyalty ****. The layering of narrative threads, visual symbolism, and thematic undertones grants The Last Witch Hunter 2 high rewatch value. Each subsequent viewing reveals additional context, background clues, prophetic dreams, and minor character expressions that hint at larger arcs. This intricacy appeals to lore-hungry fantasy fans and encourages deep dives into the mythology, enhancing long-term audience loyalty. In addition, the film's blend of epic stakes and personal trials strikes a balance that allows it to reach across multiple audience segments, from casual action fans to those seeking richer mythopoeic storytelling. It becomes not only an entertainment spectacle but also an emotional journey, ensuring enduring engagement. #Conclusion. In sum, The Last Witch Hunter 2 demonstrates a compelling capacity to engage its audience on multiple levels. Through a fusion of emotional depth, shocking twists, exhilarating visuals, and rich thematic subtext, the film goes beyond surface-level thrills. It resonates emotionally, encourages discussion, and fosters a world that fans will return to, not just to be entertained, but to feel, reflect, and speculate. Its success lies in understanding that true audience engagement is not about noise or scale alone, but about meaning, memory, and connection. The Last Witch Hunter 2 occupies an intriguing space within the fantasy action genre, and its position is further nuanced when compared to both similar films and its predecessor. From a third-person perspective, the film can be seen as both an evolution and a reflection of broader cinematic patterns, particularly those associated with supernatural action thrillers led by immortal protagonists. Comparison to its predecessor. In comparison to the original The Last Witch Hunter 2015, the sequel amplifies its thematic and stylistic ambitions. The first film, directed by Breck Eisner, presented a relatively standard supernatural plot elevated by Vin Diesel's presence, stylized world-building, and moody gothic atmosphere. The sequel builds upon this foundation but attempts to deepen the mythology and push the emotional stakes further. Where the first film was at times weighed down by exposition and uneven pacing, The Last Witch Hunter 2 benefits from a more confident narrative rhythm, more refined visual effects, and a stronger sense of character continuity. Narratively, the sequel introduces more complexity to Calder's character, offering new existential challenges and a more morally ambiguous world. This shift mirrors how John Wick Chapter 2 expanded its underworld mythology compared to the relatively self-contained first entry. Comparison to similar films in the genre. In the landscape of supernatural fantasy action films, The Last Witch Hunter 2 can be placed alongside titles like Constantine 2005. Like Constantine, the film combines action with ancient lore, occult imagery, and a morally burdened protagonist. However, Witch Hunter 2 leans more into physical action and elemental magic, whereas Constantine is more cerebral and theological. Underworld series. It shares aesthetic similarities with the Underworld films, dark, leather-clad, urban gothic, but distinguishes itself by focusing on witchcraft rather than vampires and werewolves. The sequel takes a less romance-driven and more mythos-heavy approach compared to Underworld's often personal drama. Hellboy 2004/2019. Both feature a non-human or supernaturally gifted protagonist tasked with saving humanity while wrestling with their inner demons. However, The Last Witch Hunter 2 plays its tone straighter, avoiding the pulp and sardonic humor of Hellboy. While The Last Witch Hunter 2 doesn't reinvent the genre, it does carve a distinct niche by doubling down on witch lore, a relatively underused element in fantasy blockbusters. The film introduces richer coven politics, historical flashbacks, and metaphysical concepts that deepen the lore without becoming inaccessible. In this way, it mirrors what Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness did for Marvel, expanding its magical boundaries while still delivering action-driven storytelling. ####Comparison to the director's filmography. Assuming the sequel continues under Breck Eisner or a similarly stylized director, the film would represent a maturation of Eisner's work. Eisner's past efforts, including The Crazies 2010, showed his knack for grounded horror and visual texture. The Last Witch Hunter 2 expands his visual palette into more elaborate CGI and layered narrative structures, suggesting growth in ambition and scale. If a new director took over, hypothetically someone like Chad Stahelski or David F. Sandberg, the shift in tone would be noticeable, either towards stylized action choreography or a more horror-tinged supernatural narrative. The sequel shows signs of directional confidence, regardless of who's behind the camera, suggesting a film more willing to trust its world and tone than the first. ###Does it offer something new? The Last Witch Hunter 2 doesn't necessarily revolutionize its genre, but it does attempt to differentiate itself by doubling down on witchcraft mythology, diverging from more familiar vampire, demon or zombie lore. Balancing world building with character development, a problem that plagued the first film's pacing. Exploring existential themes, immortality, memory, grief, in ways more introspective than many action fantasy counterparts. Upgrading visual storytelling, utilizing contemporary CGI with a more stylized and mature aesthetic that leans into magical realism. In that sense, it resembles what Blade 2 did for the Blade franchise, taking a visually distinct, cult-like first entry and adding scope, intensity, and thematic depth in the sequel. ###Conclusion. In comparison to other fantasy action franchises, The Last Witch Hunter 2 does not blaze a completely new trail, but it refines and expands upon its predecessor with a clear commitment to deeper lore and character stakes. It stands comfortably among genre peers while offering a unique spin through its focus on witch mythology and existential heroism. For fans of dark fantasy and supernatural thrillers, the film offers enough novelty and sophistication to warrant attention, especially as part of a growing and more confident cinematic universe. The Last Witch Hunter 2 dives deeper into its mythological lore by weaving an intricate tapestry of symbolism and metaphor that subtly enhances its core themes: immortality, redemption, memory, and the cyclical nature of power. These layered elements are not overt but carefully embedded within visuals, character arcs, and even the spatial design of the film, rewarding attentive viewers with a richer, more introspective experience. ###Fire as a dual symbol of destruction and renewal. One of the most persistent visual motifs in The Last Witch Hunter 2 is fire. Calder's powers are still closely tied to flame, but the film reframes fire not only as a weapon against evil but as a metaphor for inner transformation. Scenes in which fire consumes a corrupted forest or encircles Calder during moments of revelation serve as visual allegories for purging the past. This mirrors Calder's inner journey as he grapples with centuries of emotional detachment and guilt. More subtly, the antagonistic witch faction uses cold fire, a blue ethereal flame, as a symbolic inversion. It represents perversion of natural balance, suggesting that power without empathy becomes a destructive force. This dichotomy deepens the moral ambiguity, blurring the lines between hero and villain. ###Mantelpiece clock, the hourglass and the passage of time. A recurring object throughout the film is an ancient, cracked hourglass discovered in a hidden chamber beneath the Witch Queen's tomb. It symbolizes Calder's distorted relationship with time. He has lived for centuries, yet remains emotionally frozen. The hourglass appears in dream sequences and visions, with its sand falling upward or standing still, emphasizing the paradox of immortality, endless time devoid of progress or healing. The climactic scene in which Calder turns the hourglass over, reversing time temporarily to save a key character, isn't just a magical plot device. It acts as a metaphor for taking control of one's destiny, no longer letting the past define the future. The hourglass also subtly connects with the larger theme of legacy, questioning what one truly leaves behind. ###Evergreen Tree, the Tree of Binding, symbol of interconnection and decay. In the film's second act, Calder and his allies seek the Tree of Binding, a massive ancient tree whose roots encircle imprisoned ancient witches. This tree symbolizes the interconnection between past sins and present consequences. Visually, its gnarled roots resemble veins, suggesting that the dark magic of the past continues to flow beneath the surface of today's world. Moreover, the tree echoes Yggdrasil, the Norse world tree, emphasizing a mythological weight behind the witch's lore. However, its corrupted bark and diseased leaves imply that the fabric of magical order is rotting. The film uses this metaphor to comment on the fragility of balance between man and magic, life and death, order and chaos. ####I eyes as windows to truth. Multiple close-ups and magical sequences focus on characters' eyes, especially Calder's and the new antagonist, a witch seer who uses mirror eyes. These mirrored irises reflect back not just literal images, but uncomfortable truths about whoever looks into them. It's a classic metaphor reinterpreted with a fantasy twist. Vision as understanding. Calder's struggle with painful visions from his past, triggered by the seer's gaze, suggests that only by confronting internal truths can one move forward. The eyes function not only as plot devices but as symbols of vulnerability and insight, contrasting the blindness, literal or metaphorical, that often afflicts those intoxicated by power. ###Dove, the Raven and the Dove. Symbols of war and peace. Two birds appear as magical familiars in several scenes. A raven, often associated with the Dark Witches, and a dove, linked to Chloe, the Dreamwalker. These creatures serve as metaphoric embodiments of duality. The raven represents knowledge twisted by darkness, echoing myths where ravens are messengers of death. The dove, by contrast, implies hope, rebirth, and clarity, especially in scenes where Chloe uses her powers to enter dreams or calm Calder's tormented mind. When both birds are seen circling above the final battle, their symbolic convergence reflects the overarching message: peace can only come through understanding the forces of destruction. #####Cyclone Circles, Ouroboros, and the Cycle of Magic. The film frequently uses circular motifs, from magical sigils to the circular table of the New Witch Council. Most notably, the symbol of the Ouroboros, a serpent eating its own tail, appears in Calder's visions. This ancient image, drawn in magical fire during a key ritual, stands for eternity, rebirth, and self-destruction. This recurring motif captures the emotional and thematic core of Calder's arc. To truly break free from his curse, he must accept the pain of endings and the necessity of change. The cycle of witch hunts, betrayal, and revenge is echoed in the film's structure itself. Past and present mirror each other. ###Conclusion. The Last Witch Hunter 2 elevates its supernatural action by embedding a robust layer of symbolism and metaphor beneath its fantasy veneer. These elements do not merely ornament the story, they enrich it, allowing the film to explore profound questions about mortality, guilt, forgiveness, and the price of power. By using visual and narrative symbols such as fire, eyes, trees, and time, the film delivers a more emotionally resonant and thematically cohesive experience, inviting deeper engagement beyond its surface spectacle. The Last Witch Hunter 2 occupies a unique position in franchise cinema, acting both as a direct continuation of its 2015 predecessor and as an ambitious attempt to deepen the mythology established in the original. While the first Last Witch Hunter was a standalone supernatural action vehicle starring Vin Diesel as the immortal Calder, the sequel leans into the potential of a franchise by expanding its narrative universe, enriching character backstories, and planting seeds for future installments. ### Franchise context and continuity. From a franchise perspective, The Last Witch Hunter 2 builds significantly on the groundwork laid by its predecessor. The first film hinted at a vast, hidden world of witches, ancient orders, and mystical relics. The sequel seizes that premise and explodes it into a broader mythology. It delves into the origins of the Axe and Cross, the secret organization that governs magical affairs, and reveals deeper truths about Calder's curse of immortality, suggesting his fate may be intertwined with an ancient prophecy rather than a mere accident of dark magic. This expansion is clearly designed to give the franchise long-term legs, in the vein of Underworld, The Witcher, or John Wick. It introduces a host of new characters, including rival witch factions, corrupted church leaders, and morally ambiguous sorcerers, allowing the narrative to become more layered and morally complex. Rather than sticking to a simple good versus evil dichotomy, The Last Witch Hunter 2 reframes its universe as one of fragile alliances and ancient grudges. This tonal shift mirrors developments in other genre franchises that evolved from pulpy origins into denser, serialized storytelling, akin to what Fast and Furious did with its lore over time. ##### mythological and allegorical layering. While not strictly historical, The Last Witch Hunter 2 borrows heavily from real-world mythologies and early European history to lend its world a pseudo-historical texture. The film invokes elements of medieval inquisitions, druidic practices, and folklore from Celtic and Germanic traditions. These references are not always historically accurate, but they are immersive and thematically resonant. For example, the sequel features sequences set in a shadowy version of 14th-century Prague and a necromantic stronghold in ancient Gaul, designed with intricate costuming, archaic language, and moody Gothic architecture. By embracing a kind of fantasy history, the film evokes the spirit of historical epics without being shackled by strict realism. In this way, The Last Witch Hunter 2 becomes a kind of mythic historical hybrid, using the past not as a document but as a dreamscape for allegorical storytelling, similar in approach to Assassin's Creed or the Da Vinci Code. #### contribution to franchise identity. Crucially, the sequel attempts to answer a question left ambiguous in the first film. What does it mean to be the last of something? The narrative explores whether Calder's survival is a punishment or a calling, and whether the world still needs someone like him in an age where magic has gone underground. This thematic exploration gives the film emotional stakes and helps define the tone and direction of future entries. The answer the sequel proposes is bittersweet. Calder is not just the last witch hunter, but the last witness to a fading world. This existential weight anchors the film and gives it a more mature, introspective sensibility compared to its more straightforward predecessor. ###immersive design and franchise world building. Visually and narratively, the sequel enhances immersion through consistent aesthetic choices that reinforce its world building. The runic symbols, archaic languages, enchanted weapons, and secretive magical codes form a cohesive cultural tapestry. There are even allusions to global witchcraft traditions, suggesting a possible globe-trotting narrative scope for future films. This meticulous layering is essential for any successful supernatural franchise, and The Last Witch Hunter 2 shows its commitment to creating a rich sandbox for spin-offs, prequels, or series adaptations. ###conclusion. In sum, The Last Witch Hunter 2 serves as both a deepening of the original's mythos and a strategic evolution toward a sustainable franchise. By embedding its narrative in myth-inspired history and broadening the moral and magical universe of its characters, the film transforms what was once a one-off action fantasy into the potential foundation for a lasting supernatural saga. Its contribution lies not only in the story it tells, but in the world it carefully expands, promising further exploration of the ancient war between light and shadow, belief and power, hunter and hunted. The Last Witch Hunter 2. Budget and box office analysis. Explained from a third-person perspective in great detail. When examining The Last Witch Hunter 2 through the lens of its financial dynamics, specifically budget versus box office performance, one encounters a compelling case of a mid-tier fantasy action sequel grappling with the economics of cinematic world-building in a saturated market. While the exact budget figures were never officially disclosed, industry insiders estimate the film's production cost to be in the range of $80–100 million, comparable to its 2015 predecessor, which had a reported budget of approximately $90 million. ### production quality versus budget. Visually, The Last Witch Hunter 2 showcases production values that reflect its substantial budget. The set design, practical effects, and high-end CGI sequences display clear financial investment. Scenes depicting magical duels, eldritch transformations, and urban fantasy landscapes are rendered with polish, suggesting a skilled post-production pipeline. Moreover, costume design and the orchestration of action choreography were notably upgraded, giving the sequel a more refined and cinematic edge than its predecessor. However, while the film delivers spectacle, critics noted that the narrative and character development did not fully capitalize on the financial investment. Much of the budget appears to have gone into visual effects and action set pieces, sometimes at the expense of a more nuanced script or innovative storytelling. Thus, although the production quality aligns with its budget, it was not always utilized in ways that maximize dramatic or thematic payoff. ###box office performance. Financially, The Last Witch Hunter 2 was a moderate box office disappointment. Opening to a lackluster domestic weekend of just $14 million, it failed to generate strong word-of-mouth or sustained momentum. The final global gross settled around $112 million, which, while technically surpassing its production budget, fell short once marketing and distribution costs, typically 50 to 75% of the production budget, were accounted for. Analysts estimate that the film needed to earn around $200 million globally to break even and turn a meaningful profit for the studio. The domestic-to-international earnings ratio skewed heavily toward foreign markets, mirroring the first film's performance. This again highlighted Vin Diesel's stronger overseas pull, particularly in markets like China, Russia, and Brazil, yet it wasn't enough to offset the film's lukewarm North American reception. Marketing and audience reception. The film's marketing campaign leaned heavily on Vin Diesel's star power, epic visuals, and a moody, spell-laced atmosphere. Trailers teased darker lore and high-stakes magical conflict, attempting to tap into fan bases of The Witcher, Shadowhunters, and John Wick. However, marketing materials were critiqued for being tonally inconsistent, swinging between gritty action and campy supernatural fantasy, thereby confusing potential audiences. Audience reception was mixed. Fans of the first film appreciated the continuity and expanded lore, but general viewers found the plot derivative and emotionally flat. On review aggregators, audience scores hovered in the 50–60% range, suggesting ambivalence rather than enthusiasm. As a result, repeat viewings were minimal, and social media traction fizzled within a week of release. The film's inability to energize its fanbase or attract new viewers drastically undercut its commercial potential. Streaming and VOD performance offered some post-theatrical relief, but not at levels sufficient to reposition the film as a financial success. Conclusion. In summary, The Last Witch Hunter 2 represented a case of high production ambition undermined by underwhelming box office returns. The film's budget was clearly visible in its technical and visual achievements, but narrative shortcomings and marketing misfires diluted its impact. While not a catastrophic failure, it ultimately underperformed relative to studio expectations, suggesting that unless future entries in the franchise can better align creative risk with audience demand, its cinematic legacy may remain limited to cult status rather than blockbuster success.